Hello, everyone. What a great day it is today. I want to recognize the territory on which we live and gather today of the Stalo people who have lived here since time immemorial. The collective title and rights of the Stalo has never been extinguished or ceded to any government. It is through the laws and respect of the land and the water and the air and the non-human beings that the Stalo have survived and thrived throughout the generations. Here it is, 2017. Happy birthday, Canada, 150 years since Confederation. As a Canadian, what does the Highway of Tears, residential schools, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission mean to you? To me, it means relationships. I'd like to share my journey of relationships that began with one conversation. Oh, and speaking of conversations, what was more important than the first telephone? It was the second telephone. My journey of relationships this past 20 years in Chilliwack has been supporting families with young children and completing my master's degree in education. The desire of my heart is to support vulnerable women, which the United Nations says when you support vulnerable women, everything in your community improves. That's a really good return on investment. The Truth and Reconciliation and the 94 Calls to Action have really gripped my heart. Recently, in my role as Executive Director of the BC Association of Family Resource Programs, our relationship with the University of British Columbia's First Nations Indigenous Studies program led to something great. We now have our own statement of reconciliation. So reconciliation, what is it all about? Justice Marie Sinclair, Chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, says that reconciliation is not an Indigenous problem, but it's a Canadian problem, and it is about forging and maintaining respectful relationships, and that there are no shortcuts. My journey of relationships continued as I listened to Reconciliation Canada's Ambassador, Chief Dr. Robert Joseph. He was opening at the Minerva Foundation for Women in June 2016 in Vancouver. And he says, our future and the well-being of all our children rests in the kind of relationships that we build today. The co-chair that day, consultant Chastity Davis, shared about the Highway of Tears and the national inquiry to the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. I waited at the end of the day to talk with Chastity, and I shared about our community family support work. And I said, maybe there's a role we can play in this somehow. Well, a few months later, Chastity and I met for coffee, and then in the fall, our staff attended an amazing training at Raven Institute. We heard stories and impacts of colonization on Indigenous families from leaders Tira Fraser, Kiana Alexander, Chastity Davis, and Monique Grace Smith. When Chastity and Tira shared, we are women of mixed heritage. We are the colonized, and we are the colonizers. The energy shifted in the room. Chastity and Tira built a bridge for everyone in the room to meet on. It was fantastic. Raven Institute teaches base your life on love and start a conversation that builds a relationship to move reconciliation to action. It's fantastic. And at the end of the day, I was sitting with a corporate executive, and he says, with everything I learned here today, how will I teach my 2- and 4-year-old children? Well, one possibility is to come to a family resource program. Parents and caregivers with their babies and toddlers have come to family resource programs for friendship, education, and support for over 45 years. Family Place or Family Center might be a more common name that you would know. Family centers are communities of practice that build relationship and celebrate the day-to-day of parenting. If you imagine a rhizome, like Solomon's seal or mint, it can help you understand how this multidisciplinary model works. The staff, the Family Center staff, are child and family development experts. Yet what grows more fruit is how they interact and connect with the parents. Kindness and care is at the heart of this work. The Family Center model mirrors many Indigenous values, such as respect, humor, strength-based, and inclusion. And inclusion means there's room for everyone. Now, you might be thinking, why does reconciliation matter to me? Well, I see it as a matter of love and care for the minds of our next generation. Do you know when your brain grows the most? It's from the time you're born till you're about 3 or 4 years old. And your environment and your loving connections makes all the difference in your good health or not. If you experience a bad event, trauma, during this high growth time, your brain pathways essentially put on alert. And this alarm state can negatively affect you for the rest of your life, leaving you in a very rough place. Child psychologist Dr. Vanessa Lapointe brings us some good news. She says the science of child neurodevelopment says we can inspire resilience through connection, meaning that a loving and attentive parent can boost their child's health and resilience. It's great news, really good news. Now, on the other hand, for 120 years, 150,000 Indigenous children experienced trauma when they were separated from their parents and their families. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada heard Indigenous people tell their stories of hunger, physical, and sexual abuse. 6,000 children died while living at the 139 schools. Studies show the ripple effect of intergenerational trauma. This means today, many Indigenous families are suffering from trauma that their parent or their grandparent experienced while living at the school. Healing can include the medicine of love and safe relationships. MMIW. Do you know what this acronym stands for? So this is short for Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls. Spurred on by the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called for a national inquiry to the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls in 2015. The 4,000 murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls include those who have traveled on British Columbia's Highway of Tears, Highway 16. Indigenous women and their families are disproportionately impacted by racism, sexism, and colonialism, says Patty Hadju, Minister for the Status of Women. We need to hear their voices, she says. And young minds in our community are listening. So reconciliation is about relationships, and it matters because it points to the injustice. But how do we move toward reconciliation? How are we going to do that? Well, conversation, relationships, and action. The City of Vancouver took action and proclaimed 2014 as a year of reconciliation in an effort to heal from the past and build new relationships. In 2016, Gord Downey of the band Tragically Hip co-authored a true story, Secret Path. This is a story of 12-year-old Chani Wenjack, and he's running through the forest. It's wintertime, and he's run away from residential school. He's trying to find his way home. But Chani dies trying. It's October 22nd, 1966. I never knew Chani, but I'll always love him. His story is Canada's story, says Gord Downey. We must become one and find a path of reconciliation together forever. So conversation, relationship, and action. So in the same way, my conversation with Chastity led me to the University of British Columbia's First Nations Indigenous Study program. And in the fall, our staff developed a relationship with student Danielle Krejci. And based on Danielle's research and literature review in 2017, Danielle wrote our Statement of Reconciliation, and we are so grateful. The next step in our journey will be to live by the promises that we've collected in our Statement of Reconciliation and to share our work with whoever would be interested. What a great time to be alive. Quoting Helen Keller, "I am only one, but I am still one. I can't do everything, but I can do something." So if I were to blue sky, to dream of where these relationships and conversations would lead us to, I see that we're all together and everyone is healthy and we're in safe and loving ways and we're at peace. Because we are one. We are one human race. And here in this community, and here in British Columbia, and here in Canada, we can find the good road together and make our history together. Raven Institute taught us to base our life on love and start a conversation. I invite you today to find someone. Start a conversation and ask, what do I want to learn about reconciliation? Maybe your smile will win you a new friend. The possibilities are wide open. Reconciliation is here now and stands with outstretched hands to you and to me. Find someone today and have a conversation because we have the love to do this. Thank you.